Thank you so much. As Miguel said, my name is Valerie Love. I'm the Clean Energy Campaigner with Center for Biological Diversity, and I'm honored to host this panel today on keeping fossil fuels in the ground. You all might remember when the counterpoint slogan kind of emerged as "Drill, baby, drill," right? Do y'all remember that? So now we're coming together under the unifying rallying cry of "Keep it in the ground." Because we know, scientists have been telling us that we need to keep about 80% of known fossil fuel reserves in the ground if we're going to stay under the 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise, after which all the governments in the world agree would be catastrophic and runaway climate change after that. So when I learned that the oil industry has 4 to 5 times as much oil in their reserves as can be safely burned on our planet, I realized that changing our light bulbs, driving a Prius is simply not enough, because we have a rogue industry that is literally banking on our demise. So we have to build the people power to counteract those interests. And today we have some amazing panelists who are doing that work, who are building that people power and taking on some of the most powerful interests in the world. So our first speaker is Leila Salazar Lopez. She is the executive director at Amazon Watch, working to defend the Amazon and advance Indigenous rights. She has more than 15 years of experience working to defend the world's rainforests, including grassroots organizing and managing international advocacy campaigns. She worked as the campaign director of Rainforest Action Network's agribusiness campaign. She was an organizer for the Amazon Watch Cleanup Ecuador campaign and an organizer at Global Exchange. She is the graduate of both the University of California at Santa Barbara and Green Corps. Leila lives in San Francisco, California, where she is active in her community, and she's a proud Chicana Latina and a mother of 2. Please welcome Leila.
Good morning, everyone. How's everybody feeling? Great. We're actually going to watch a short video, if you can cue that up. As Valerie mentioned, my name is Leila Salazar Lopez. I'm the executive director of Amazon Watch. And I had hoped to be joined by one of our close colleagues and friends from the Amazon, Nina Walinga. For visa reasons, she couldn't make it here in time, but that's the reason why I wanted to show this short video to honor her, acknowledge her presence in this room. She's one of our close colleagues from Sarayaku, the Quechua community of Sarayaku. Maybe some of you might have heard of Sarayaku because of their historic victory against the Ecuadorian state in one of the emblematic cases for indigenous rights and for keeping fossil fuels in the ground in the Amazon. Are we ready for it? Great. We'll start with the video and then I'll keep talking.
Life on Earth would not be possible without the oxygen and fresh water generated in places like the Amazon rainforest. But the Amazon is being destroyed by the oil industry for short-term economic gain, threatening the existence of the plants, animals, and people who live in the rainforest.
Ecuador is not going to get out of poverty just because they come and drill for oil in the Amazon. Ecuador is going to lose the only rainforest that we have left. It's going to destroy cultures and the environment, kill animals. That's not getting out of poverty.
The people who live in the Amazon rainforest are doing everything they can to stop the expansion of the oil frontier, but local governments are supporting the oil companies, under the false impression that drilling for oil will get them out of poverty.
If you look at those places where they are drilling oil, those are the regions most people living with terrible health conditions and no education. Those are the regions that are most poor. thought that they could come here and exploit oil and then just wash their hands and they would move on. But that did not happen. We're a pain in the ass for the government right now. And that makes me hopeful. That makes me know that we can get further. You cannot justify human rights abuses with economical arguments. We are also human beings, just as anyone else, and we have the same rights as anyone else to choose our way of life and to have that choice respected.
This is not just a local issue. This is a global issue. If oil companies are allowed to destroy the Amazon, it would permanently change the climate in both South America and North America. This will have devastating consequences for the entire world.
The cycle of the weather has changed here. When it should rain, it doesn't rain. And when it shouldn't rain, it rains. There's a whole system in the forest. It's not just, oh, there are animals living there. It's a whole world, how they interact, how they live, what they eat, where they move. I remember my grandfather saying once that it is from the Amazon that the breath of the world comes. Because without the Amazon, the world would not breathe.
The International Energy Agency has said that if we want to keep global temperatures from increasing, at least half of the world's oil and coal supply should stay in the ground. If something isn't done soon, the world's temperature could permanently increase by 8 degrees, a critical level at which the global ecosystem would move towards an unstoppable collapse. But it's not too late to change this. Citizens from all over the world must come together and urge political leaders to keep the oil in the ground. Go to AmazonWatch.org to learn how you can help protect the Amazon rainforest, and share this video with anyone you know who likes to breathe fresh air. Together we can let our voices be heard and keep our world beautiful.
So that was a little bit of an introduction to some of my comments that I'm going to make. How many have seen this video already? Oh, good. About 2 million people have watched this video from all around the world. We launched it almost 2 years ago, right before the People's Climate March. How many people marched in the People's Climate March, either in New York, here in the Bay Area, LA, wherever you're from? How many people marched in the People's Climate March? Well, thank you. Over the last 2 years, the global movement for climate justice, the global movement to keep fossil fuels in the ground has really grown. Just 2 years ago when we launched this video, we began to share the information about the importance of keeping fossil fuels in the ground, keeping oil in the ground in the Amazon. And we weren't alone. This is something that we've been working on for all of our history. Amazon Watch is celebrating our 20-year anniversary this year. And ever since our inception, we've been working to support communities who are calling for protecting the blood of Mother Earth, for keeping the oil in the ground. And with the Uwa people of Colombia, with the Quichua from Sarayaku. It's something that our indigenous allies, our NGO allies on the ground in the Amazon have been saying for many, many years, way before we even knew them, that in order to keep the balance of the earth, we have to keep the blood of the Mother Earth inside the ground. We have to protect and respect all life. And they brought that message to us. The Uwa people of Colombia brought that message to us in 1999. They came out of their rainforests of Colombia. They came to LA, where Occidental Petroleum is based. It's a company that wanted to drill on their land, on their ancestral territories. And they came to Los Angeles to give a warning to the world to say that they didn't want this to happen. They wanted to keep the blood of Mother Earth in the ground, and they needed international support. And many of us came to their solidarity and joined forces with the UWA. And a few years later, Occidental Petroleum announced that they were going to leave UWA territory. This is just one of many victories over the years of keeping oil companies out of the Amazon. And we're continuing to do that. We're continuing to stand with our indigenous allies who are really on the front lines of what we're calling this global climate change battle. They are on the front lines of defending the world's resources. 80% of the world's remaining resources remain on indigenous peoples' territories. And so that's why when you see reports from Global Witness, when you see these reports that say that environmental and indigenous activists and women activists who are defending Mother Earth are, the threats and the murders against them are growing, it's because they're defending 80% of the world's resources, including oil. And what we're doing right now is what I was mentioning. 2 years ago, we kind of keep it in the ground was kind of a tagline. The way I see it is, The Guardian launched this campaign. We were starting to talk about keep it in the ground. It was kind of a tagline. And we all started saying, it's time to keep fossil fuels in the ground, keep oil in the ground. And we came together at the People's Climate March. We've come together at global climate conferences in New York, in Lima, in Paris, and now soon in Morocco. We've come together both internationally and nationally. And one of the things that we've done over the last couple years is build an alliance, an America's wide alliance to keep fossil fuels in the ground. Because as stated in Valerie's comments and also in the video, we have to keep at least 80% of fossil fuels in the ground to avoid climate chaos. We already know that we're in climate chaos, but if we don't want it to get spiraling worse, we need to keep 80% of the fossil fuels in the ground. And governments have made commitments in the COP21 agreement. They've made commitments to reduce emissions. They've made commitments to 1.5 instead of 2 degrees, which is great. But we need these governments to keep their commitments. Just 1 month after the COP21 climate conference, Ecuador and China made a deal without the consultation of indigenous people, of Sarayaku, of the Zapata, of the Shiriar people of the Amazon. They went forth and signed an agreement to concession off the entire Sarayaku territory, 135,000 acres of pristine rainforest. Over 300,000 of Zapata people's territory. Pristine rainforest, what we call the living forest. Every single part of the rainforest is alive, from the tiniest microscopic organism to the largest kapok tree. Everything is alive. And that's why we're working really hard to ensure that our partners on the ground, that they have support in their resistance. They have support in their defense of their living forests and their rainforests. And that's what they've done. As soon as the Ecuadorian government and China signed an agreement to auction off their land, they came together in an alliance and they called on their international allies and said, we need support in calling for and pressuring Ecuador and China. We need support to defend our ancestral territories, to defend our living forests, to defend our sacred natural sites, not only for the living beings of the rainforest and for the children of the Amazon, but for all our children, for our global climate, for everyone, for every living thing on this planet. Because if we don't protect the Amazon, if we don't protect the forests, the lungs of the planet, our weather system will be in chaos. That's what the global scientists say, and that's what the elders of the Amazon also have confirmed. So one of the things, we've been doing everything that we can to pressure the Chinese government, to let them know that the people on the ground are opposed to oil development on their territories. They haven't been consulted. They don't want another Chevron destruction in the north, like what happened in the northern Ecuadorian Amazon. They don't want 30 years of lawsuits to mitigate impacts. They want to stop the impacts before they happen. They want to keep the rainforest pristine for their communities and for all of us, for all of the world. So we've done everything to pressure and try to hold the Ecuadorian and Chinese governments accountable and the companies accountable, and including on-the-ground resistance, including marches. Just this last March on International Women's Day, there was a historic gathering of over 500 women from 7 different indigenous nationalities. This was the first time that they had ever come together in a march to say, defend our ancestral territories, keep the fossil fuels off our territory. And we stood with them, friends from We Can, friends from Pachamama Alliance, friends from Amazon Watch. We all came together from Idle No More. We all came together and stood in solidarity with them. And we said, what more can we do? There's already oil coming out of the Amazon. Where is it going? Well, we did a little bit of digging. We looked into shipments of oil from the Amazon, and guess what we found out? Where do you think the majority of the oil from the Amazon is going? Wild guess. Over 60% of the oil from the Amazon is coming to California. Most of it is going to the El Segundo Chevron refinery in Southern California. Some of it is coming right here to Richmond, to Vallejo, and to Martinez. So, in about a month, we're going to be disclosing this information publicly in a report, and we're going to be launching a new campaign to urge any purchasers of oil from these refineries to encourage these refineries to stop shipping Amazon crude. We need to get off Amazon crude. This crude is coming from the northern Amazon. So this crude is coming from the northern Amazon, where Chevron destroyed. It's coming from Yasuni National Park. And they want to expand this destruction to the southern Amazon in Ecuador, to the Zapatas territory, the Quechua territory. And we're going to stand with our partners to say, no, we're going to defend this territory, we're going to keep this oil in the ground, we're going to join with our allies across the US who are also working to keep fossil fuels on public lands, and indigenous lands, on native lands, and we're going to join with people all around the world who are calling for the same message to keep fossil fuels in the ground. So join us. If you want to find out more, go to amazonwatch.org and go to the workshop that's led by our campaigner, Adam Zuckerman. Thanks so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Leila. Incredible work. So our next speaker is someone I am privileged to call a friend and a close colleague working together on the National Keep It in the Ground campaign. Her name is Ruth Breech. She is a senior campaigner with Rainforest Action Network's Climate and Energy team. Ruth organizes corporate accountability campaigns, frontline communities impacted by fossil fuel leasing, grassroots support networks across the country, and coordinates support for the National Keep It in the Ground campaign. She specializes in organizing, organizational capacity building, air monitoring, fundraising, and media trainings. She is the recipient of the 2009 Healthy School Heroes Award for her leadership in relocating an elementary school in Ohio away from plastics plant's cancer-causing emissions. Please welcome Ruth.
Is it okay to do this? That's much better. Thank you so much, Valerie. Thank you to all being here. Also a big thank you to SoilNotOil organizers, volunteers. I know how much work a lot of these conferences can be, and I'm totally stoked to be on this panel with such amazing leaders in the movement. So again, my name is Ruth Breech. I'm with Rainforest Action Network. And I really just want to say here that while I am, an individual, I am part of an amazing climate team at Rainforest Action Network, a part of an amazing group of allies around the country that are both indigenous leaders, tribes. We've got NGO allies, regional leaders that I'll be talking about more. So I'm just one person representing a very big movement that I hope to tell you about right now. So we'll just go on there. Great, so Valerie touched on it, Leila has touched on it. We only have so much carbon that we can burn, period. If we're gonna stop climate change crisis that we are in right now, we have to stop burning carbon. We have to keep fossil fuels in the ground. That is the only alternative. And it is a message that has been out there for some time, but it is now, we're in a consciousness, an awakening, that we actually realize this. All scientists agree we have to keep the vast majority of fossil fuels in the ground. When we started to look and better understand, where are those climate change emissions coming from, we have some really clever policy folks, and they were saying that 25%, so 23 to 25%, I am an activist, I'll give that extra 2%, is 25% is coming from the United States federal lands. So this includes coal mining, fracking for natural gas and for oil, and offshore and onshore drilling that is happening on US federal lands. So U.S. federal lands, this was something that was very kind of mystical to me that I didn't truly understand until this past year and have been digging a little bit deeper. So U.S. federal lands are actually administered by the U.S. federal government on behalf of us, the U.S. people. There's a huge land rights discussion to be had because actually these are all indigenous lands that have been taken over at one point. But within this current system and framework that we're working within is that we, the American people, pay taxes and then the government administers these resources, okay? So we're actually all responsible for these shared assets. If you look, no, not ready yet, sorry, is that these are across the entire country. Most of them are in the West because that's how, as the country grew and the states became states, they were trading off federal lands with the government, and that's how this happened. Most of these are seen under the Department of Interior. The Department of Interior is in President Obama's cabinet. Our simple ask to President Obama is that he has the executive authority to end federal fossil fuel leasing. So our federal lands here that we all share in these assets and we need to maintain for future generations and as key carbon sinks around the world is that he end this program. Because what's happening is that these federal lands includes our US forests, national parks, indigenous sacred sites, prairies, meadows, deserts. We're at like 650 million acres of public lands, and they're being sold for rock bottom prices. You know the story, you've heard it before. I think it goes across with whether we're fighting GMOs, or fighting oil in the Amazon, or we're talking about public lands being sold here. It is the wealthiest companies. You know their logos: Shell, Anadarko, Chevron, ConocoPhillips. These are the top 15 leaseholders on US public lands. So these are the people that are buying the coal. These are the people that are buying the gas to frack. These are the people that are doing the drilling for oil. And they're buying them at literally starting at $2 an acre. What can you think of? Please just holler at me. What can you buy, especially right now here in the Bay Area, for $2?
Pack of gum.
Pack of gum. Depends on what kind of gum.
That's true, the cheap kind.
Anybody else? Coffee where? Malt liquor. All right, not a lot of things. It's hard. It is indeed cheaper than a fast food hamburger, which we know is some of the grossest, cheapest products out there. Go ahead. But the stakes are high. You know, we've heard this story before. We know this story. We know that companies are putting profits over people. And we're here to say, no, nuh-uh, this isn't happening now. And that's why we're coming together, because the stakes are so high. Our friends at Center for Biological Diversity and Friends of the Earth put together this amazing report showing the extent of what we could save. So if when President Obama ends the federal fossil fuel leasing program and stops selling off our public lands to dirty corporate interests and dirty energy, we could keep 450 billion tons of carbon pollution out of the air. We could keep that in the ground. And just for context, because I know numbers are hard to really grasp what that is. So how many are familiar with the Clean Power Plan that the Obama administration has put out to stop power plants? Okay, that's gonna save 90 billion. We're talking about 450 billion. And I'm not saying that shouldn't be done, because it should. It's not either or, it's and. It's yes and. And this is what we're talking about. Okay? And we know this. We know this story too. We know how to do this, and that's what we're doing. We're getting to work. Last September, so it's been just about 1 year, we went to Washington, D.C. after we organized over 400 prominent leaders, organizations, and allies around the country to sign on to this letter to ask President Obama to end the federal fossil fuel leasing program. And in that moment, it was just this really beautiful moment in Washington, D.C., and a place that I don't really like to spend a lot of time, but we had representatives from the impacted community. So we had people from Big Mountain, DNA Nation from Arizona that had been affected by Peabody. We had people from Utah tar sands resistance that had fought the tar sands. We had people from the Gulf Coast come and tell their story about what it's like to be living near and with climate refugees and people being displaced and the struggle after Hurricane Katrina. We had Tim DeChristopher, who's in the background there, who was Bitter 70. Are people familiar with that story? Yeah, right on, right on. Such like a really like a beacon of resistance, and he still is active and was with us there in that moment. And then we had some really great policy people. So just this really strong showing of really launching this campaign, because Keep It in the Ground is such a huge movement. Layla's talking about this really global context, and here I'm talking about this very U.S. domestic-based issue that is focusing even more on just federal fossil fuel leasing. So it's really awesome to see all these folks come together in our original launch. That was in September, and I'm kind of going to go through a chronology now that it was like all this energy was happening. How many of you saw those pictures of people kayaking in Seattle, right? Right? Or the Portland Bridge hang? Oh, right? That was epic. That was epic. It was so beautiful. And it was just this way of showing like how people-powered resistance is getting work done, organizing works. And we saw that, and I think, so Greenpeace and the leaders there in the Northwest, it was beautiful. And then Shell pulled out. Shell pulled out all of their leases out of the Arctic. I will not say it's smaller, but on that same day, I had done a report called Public Lands, Private Profits, and it was the same day as the Shell announcement, and we got a Newsweek exclusive. So for like 1 hour, I was like, yeah, I'm at the top of the world. And then like an hour later, Shell pulled out of the Arctic, and I was like, yeah, that's even better. But that's okay. So that's how it works sometimes. So we're just building. We're talking about this. We're talking about ending federal fossil fuel leasing. President Obama has the executive authority to do the work. And then Bernie Sanders, so this is before like the feel the burn happened and like as it was building. And Bernie Sanders came out and introduced Keep It in the Ground legislation in the Senate. And then that was also mirrored in the House. So we had some really great DC energy happening. And what we really felt like was that the grassroots power needed to be shown to really balance out that DC, because we didn't want this to be a coastal campaign. It wasn't a DC, San Francisco thing. This was like a real, true people-powered revolution that was coming from those impacted communities. And then this happened. I was in Colorado organizing for this next action, and during this trip, the Keystone Pipeline was rejected by President Obama. How many folks worked on that? Yeah, awesome, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Awesome. And I think this was such a beautiful moment on so many levels, because it was a win for the climate movement. So many people came together to make this win happen. There was not one organization that held this down. It was everyone pitching together, some people tagging out when they needed to, but keeping and sustaining the drumbeat the whole entire time. And that's part of what makes a beautiful campaign, and that's part of what makes this win so amazing. But just to be that cherry at the top was that President Obama, in his rejection speech, said, we have to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And that was like the biggest acknowledgement for us in this campaign, and that the administration was starting to hear that the years of using that phrase was finally set in. I want to take a moment to also just acknowledge and recognize some of the organizing traditions that this work is following. I definitely was raised in this tradition, working with refinery communities, not only here in the US, but internationally, is that you want to keep the coal in the hole and keep the oil in the soil. And I think that's part of what we're doing here. And to look at the people that came before us, Nigeria, the Niger Delta, the Ogoni Nine, Ken Saro-Wiwa, yeah. That this life and their sacrifice is still alive now. Oh, I'm definitely going over, but I'll hurry up. And so it's something to acknowledge in the work that we're doing now, and that though this was 20 years ago, it's still alive now. Keep going. And then also, Layla was just talking about the work in the Amazon and Ecuador and nature's rights. So just keeping in mind that all the work that has been done to use keep it in the ground as phrase and actually get it out there. And then what we see now is I'm going to go through just a really quick chronology of the people-powered events that have happened. So we're talking about these lease sales of $2 an acre of land being sold, and I'm not exaggerating, $2, $1.50 in some cases, of land being sold for fracking in Colorado. So here we have 6 people that were sitting in and blocking the entrance to the Bureau of Land Management office, along with 100 other people that joined us to start that resistance. And at that point, as the national allies got together, we said, we're going to show up at every single land auction. And they happen multiple times a year in Utah, in Colorado, in Wyoming, in Nevada, and that's exactly what we did. And while we were doing that, so that was November, January, President Obama announced that he was putting a freeze, so he's putting a moratorium on coal leasing in the US. So this was huge. It's huge. It's not ending the program, but it's a moratorium, so they're not issuing any more new leases, which is exactly one of the asks where we're getting there, but we still have onshore oil and gas and offshore. We keep going. So we're taking this momentum. I mean, it's like we can't even catch it a breath. We're just sprinting this whole time. And then we have people in Utah that are disrupting the auction from inside, which is really high risks. And they have this beautiful song that they're singing I'd like to share with you at the end. And it was just, this momentum is just building. So this is Utah, Reno. They started with 40 people at the first auction, or 20 people at the first one, 40, and then it was over 150 at this last one in June. Just really amazing organizing that's happening on the ground. And so again, we're just building, we have all these auctions happening, and then we get another big announcement. In the Obama administration's 5-year plan, the Atlantic is taken off the table, and there will be no new drilling in the Atlantic. This is all big and great news, but that means that the Arctic is still on the table, and that means the Gulf has become a sacrifice zone. And the people of the Gulf, who also just in March saw the first climate refugees, people were moved by the government from Louisiana away from their homes to other places because of sea level rise. These are the same people that had to stay at the Superdome because of Hurricane Katrina. And what we saw here is they came back fierce and strong and with so much heart and truly inspiring and scare the shit out of the organizations and the government to the point where they're actually putting the leases online and streaming them coming up. Another one, if folks were participated in Break Free from Fossil Fuels, anybody? Yeah, that was a lot of really good, clean fun. There was direct actions with civil disobedience around the world, and we were part of one that was in Colorado that included over 300 people, again at Lakewood, in an attempt to disrupt that auction. And it was, it got a little crazy, but it scared them, and that's what it was supposed to do. So to keep going here, we know the work that we have to do. We know the work that we've set out to do. We've got some really big things coming up right now. So any of you who are into traveling or you have amazing activist networks, let them know about this. August 20th, there is going to be a huge march of solidarity, a week of resistance, love, and action in New Orleans. So this will be for the August 24th lease sale, where 23.5 million acres of the Gulf of Mexico are set to be auctioned off to companies like Shell, Chevron, Apache. So if you want to be involved in that, please contact me. And then we're also going to be celebrating our 1-year anniversary. We've got a big event that we're planning in Washington, D.C. that includes bringing people from around the country to go to Washington, D.C. to go to the Obama administration. And the time is urgent, and it's now. We've got a few months that we can work on him to end this federal fossil fuel leasing program. And just one more. This is the time. It's now. We're asking for all new leases to be canceled. This isn't something that can happen overnight. This would be a huge step to get us to the start of a just transition. We have about 30 years of fossil fuels that are in the leases that have already been granted. And this, we just stop the harm now, and so that we can move to this clean energy economy. And we need all of you and your help and support to make that happen. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth. As you can tell, she's a powerhouse. It's awesome working with you. All right, our next speaker is Andrés Soto, also someone, if you were part of the climate movement in the Bay Area, or lots of other movements in the Bay Area, you probably have seen him around. He's everywhere. He's a legend here. So he is He is from Richmond, California. He's in the Richmond community, or he is the Richmond community organizer for Communities for a Better Environment. He's a member of the Venetians for a Safe and Healthy Community. He's on the steering committee. And he is an advocate for social justice who for more than 30 years has engaged in the struggle for civil rights, educational rights, immigrant rights, and environmental justice. He has also been on the front lines of the battles for gun control, youth violence prevention, elimination of police brutality, and he helped create the progressive movement in Richmond, California. He's, yes. He's a founding member of the Richmond Progressive Alliance, who's took on Chevron and worked to hold them accountable for their impact in the community, and has worked to stop dangerous oil trains in the Bay Area. He is also a working musician and has played his saxophones around the world. And on top of that, he's a proud father of 2 and is enjoying grandfatherhood with his 4 grandchildren. Please welcome Andrés.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Richmond, California. And yeah, shout out for Richmond, because we fought long and hard to put this place on the map. One of the things I want to let you know is the progressive movement that we've been able to build here in Richmond to address a wide range of social issues that affect our community are rooted in a long history of social justice in this community. In fact, Martin Luther King spoke right here in the Richmond Auditorium in 1962. Duke Ellington played here. They also had professional wrestling and professional basketball and boxing here in the Richmond Auditorium. So, you know, you're in a very historic place. And I'm a lifelong resident here until about 3 years ago. I moved over to Benicia, and I'll mix that story in as well. But I think, you know, germane to this gathering is that, you know, we are very clear that we think globally, but what we do know is that we can act locally. We have the power as a local community to challenge the, you know, dominant paradigm or the powers that be, whatever you want to call it, because those are people in our community. And Chevron helped put the people in power that would do their will, and we were able to start to take them out one at a time by grassroots community action. But one of the things I want to do real quick, because I know this is, you know, international conference, right? And this will maybe help also get your blood flowing off your place you've been sitting. So, how many people here live in Richmond? Please stand up. All right, hometown folk. Now, how many people live in the East Bay? Please stand up. All right, more hometown folk. Thank you. And how many people live in the Greater Bay Area? Okay. Now, how many of you are Californians? Stand up. How many people from out of state? Please stand up. All right, welcome to California, welcome to Richmond. And how many people are from out of the country and they're here visiting? All right, bienvenidos a todos. So thank you everybody for being here in Richmond. So our story is really one where, for me, it started with, you know, a long history of a political analysis of this town being a corporatocracy. I didn't invent that term, but I think it explains rule of the corporations. And they did it through infiltrating the community for generations and changing the way people thought about things like Standard Oil, now Chevron. They thought it was a good thing in the community. Well, we came to understand really through the environmental justice movement as articulated by people like Dr. Henry Clark and Ethel Dodson and many of our predecessors who showed that, well, wait a minute, the pollution that's coming from places like Chevron, the Port of Richmond and the transportation network are disproportionately affecting low-income neighborhoods. Now, Richmond used to be mostly white working class, and then it became mostly African American working class, and now it's mostly Latino working class. And so as these changes go, one of the things that are constant is the environmental injustice on the low-income and working class communities has persisted. And that is why we have to look through that kind of analysis and then go after the power structure that supports it. And what we did was we decided, look, Chevron's able to buy politicians, who was Soto and The Godfather, like so many nickels and dimes in their pocket. Well, we decided if we use grassroots power, we can take these people out by exposing them. And we had a range of wedge issues, whether it was stopping a casino at Point Melati, or a tax measure on Chevron, or whether it was about police brutality. All these issues play out during elections, and if you choose one side, you force the other side to choose a side. And that's how you're able to get the people informed as to who's really working for them. Well, here in Richmond, of course, with Chevron, I'm with Communities for a Better Environment. And we have been articulating through what we call the triad. We have legal staff, we have scientific staff, and we have organizing staff. And we plan together. They might say we plot together, but we plan together on how to go about using the regulatory system and putting political pressure on those regulatory systems to enact improvements. Now, there's many people out there who would like to see Chevron just shut down. And as many of us would, the reality is it's not going to happen right now. They know they're into obsolescence, and we know they're into obsolescence. The question is, how are we going to get there? And so one of the things that we worked on was when they wanted to have their modernization plan that would allow them to process heavier, dirtier crude, we came up with a whole range of conditions that would essentially not allow them to bring in tar sands because they would blow through their emission limits. And so we got a unanimous vote through the Planning Commission. But Chevron, as clever as they always are, they paid $30 million extra in a community benefits program to buy off the votes of our current mayor, Tom Budd, and a city council member, J.L. Myrick, who's up for re-election in November, in order to have a $30 million scholarship program for kids graduating from high school. Well, most kids drop out in 9th grade. So how's that really going to benefit? Well, it's good for them, but it's better to invest in preschool universally and get kids started out right. So that happened. But we did move the ball forward. We got greater protections. Now we're in a battle with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, whose mission is to keep our air clean for the public's health and safety. But what are they doing? The staff is bought by industry, but the board members are elected officials. So we have been actually working with and lobbying the board members to put pressure on their staff to establish an air emissions rule that we created that will, with the workers in the refineries, the operators of the refineries, the United Steelworkers, and the community working together to put a cap on emissions so that while they try to figure out how they want to reduce emissions over the next 10 years, they will actually not continue to go up, because greenhouse gases have been going up for the past 20 years here in the Bay Area refinery sector, and with those, the toxic air contaminants that disproportionately impact communities like Richmond, Rodeo, Martinez, Pittsburgh, and Benicia. Now, we also have been fighting, so we have a major battle coming up, and we got them to agree to do an environmental impact report, which they were refusing to do, saying it was illegal. But with public pressure, we were able to force the staff to have to do the will of the people. Now, this battle is not over, so we encourage you who are here in the Bay Area to join us, because this can be a precedent for the rest of the country. There are no caps on refinery emissions by rule anywhere in the United States. So this is the first place we have to stop the bad before building the good. Now, I know we only have a couple more minutes here, so I just want to briefly tell you that we've been fighting crude by rail. 2 weeks ago, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal talking about the decline of crude by rail, and one of the factors it cited was major public opposition on the West Coast from building facilities to get it here. So we have been successful by, death by 1,000 cuts. Our battle is not over yet in Benicia, where they have a major plan for crude by rail at the Valero refinery. But we got a unanimous vote against it at the Planning Commission. Valero appealed to the City Council, who acquiesced, the City Council majority acquiesced to Valero's request for a continuance so they could go to the Surface Transportation Board, a federal agency nobody ever heard of, that mediates between shippers and railroads. And they want to get those guys to weigh in and basically strip away local land use authority when it comes to anything dealing with the railroads. So it is a very significant national case that is going before them. We hope they reject even considering it because it's none of their business. And if they don't, we hope that in the end they will weigh in properly. If not, we have plans in November to remove the people on the council who supported that continuance. Because we don't take no mess, right? If you don't vote our way, we're gonna take you out. And that's a simple message. And the only way we take them out is get in the streets, knock on doors, and go to neighbors and say, these people are selling you out. And it's that simple. And people understand that. So in the last minute that I have, I just want to say we've been fighting crude by rail here in Richmond, but we are not just about fighting the bad, we're also about building the good, just transition, and we have been developing a plan with our Richmond Environmental Justice Coalition for a just transition plan for the community of Richmond. First thing we want to do is to get the city of Richmond to turn all public buildings to have rooftop solar. Very simple for them to do. It's an investment in the future, and we're already on a community choice aggregation. We're no longer with PG&E, we're with Marin Clean Energy. So we have gotten other cities around here to join us, including Benicia, San Pablo, El Cerrito, and your cities can join too, and other cities right now are working on their plan. So with that, I just want to also let you know that our coalition has our Power Festival starting at 1 p.m. today over here at Nichols Park, about 2 blocks away up McDonald Avenue. And it's 1 to 4, family friendly, and it's all about building the good here in Richmond for the future. Thank you so much today.
Thank you so much, Andres. Amazing, amazing work. All right, so our next and final speaker is Mia Reback, and she is a climate justice organizer living in Portland, Oregon. Traveled down here for the conference. She is the lead organizer at 350 PDX, the local chapter of 350.org, and she's an active member with the all-volunteer group Portland Rising Tide. She graduated from Reed College in 2014 with a BA in Environmental Studies and Economics. And I got in touch with her because I've been involved, in fighting oil train projects, in fighting pipelines, and she was involved in a really innovative push to tackle that all at once, all new fossil fuel infrastructure at once on the local level. So please welcome Mia.
Great, well thank you so much for having me here today. I am going to be speaking about local action that we can take on the city and county level to comprehensively stop new fossil fuel developments. Last November, Portland, Oregon passed the nation's first comprehensive piece of legislation targeting all new fossil fuel infrastructure projects, coal, oil, and gas together at once. So it said, no new fossil fuel infrastructure is the right rallying cry for this moment in history, a stand that would galvanize the rest of the planet and demonstrate where the future lies. When we're talking about fossil fuel infrastructure, it's really, really important just to note that for the fossil fuel economy to function, it needs to keep building things to transport, store, extract, refine, and combust fossil fuels. One thing that we really learned in starting to address fossil fuel infrastructure is that local governments actually have a lot of power to protect the health and safety of their communities, and that we don't need to rely on state and federal action to address fossil fuel infrastructure. And we also learned through our work that we need to build diverse coalitions that have a diversity of strategies and tactics that we will use to win. And that's how we as communities can build power to take on the fossil fuel industry. Types of fossil fuel infrastructure we're talking about, I'm just going to go through these really quickly. We're talking about pipelines, coal terminals, can keep going through them, oil tank farms that store liquefied natural gas, petroleum, tar sands, crude, and the like, as well as the oil trains that transport the crude to get there. These are just examples of fossil fuel infrastructure. Why this is important? In 2014, the Rising Tide Network put together a map that assessed proposals for new fossil fuel infrastructure or major expansions. And what we learned is that there were 28 proposals for large-scale new fossil fuel terminals. And when we added up the carbon impact based on research done by the Sightline Institute, we found that altogether these projects have the carbon emission equivalents of 5 Keystone XL pipelines. So major carbon bomb that we cannot have if we want to stay within the thresholds for a safe and livable climate. One of these projects was proposed in Portland, and this really laid the foundation for the fossil fuel policy that we passed last November. The Portland proposal was for a propane export terminal by a Canadian company, Pembina Pipeline Corporation. This terminal, if it had been built, its carbon footprint would have been bigger than the entire city of Portland. And we really used that in tandem with our carbon reduction goals to say to our city council, hey, you're telling the people that we need to change our behavior to not emit carbon pollution, but you're going to at the same time let a Canadian company come into our town and emit the same amount of greenhouse gases you're asking us to stop emitting. That's not okay. When the project was first proposed, our entire city council was behind the project, and our mayor had hailed it as a great investment for the city of Portland. And I bring this up to note that if you're in your community and you're facing fossil fuels and you have a council that is pro-fossil fuel, don't be discouraged, keep up the fight. It is possible to flip your council's perspective, and that's exactly what we did through grassroots organizing, showing up at public hearings, as well as utilizing bird dogging and direct action to pressure our city council. By the time this project was rejected, no deal, Portland does not pick Pembina. They cited public opposition as the main reason. 3,000 public comments were submitted opposing the terminal, and only 3 in favor of it, which is pretty incredible. And so here we have a quote from Portland Mayor Charlie Hale saying, "The message from scientists is clear. We don't have time. We need to do it now. We have other technologies. We're using them now. There's plenty we can do." And this was him on the other side of his support for this propane terminal, coming out and realizing that there are no bridge fuels, natural gas and propane are a false solution, and that we need to be comprehensively moving away from all fossil fuel developments towards a renewable energy and energy efficiency-based economy. Local governments, despite, we all know about the Commerce Clause and lots of things that make it seem like local governments can't act to regulate the fossil fuel industry, but we found that not to be the case. We have constitutionally recognized powers that local governments can and should be protecting the welfare of their citizenry, especially based on health and safety. The Supreme Court has recognized land use as a police power entrusted to local governments, and many states, including Oregon, have in their state constitutions given local jurisdictions home rule authority to protect health and safety. Those of us doing this work addressing fossil fuels know that all fossil fuel infrastructure pose significant risks to the communities they're in, whether it's pollution from refineries, risks from oil trains derailing, which happens far too often. All pipelines leak, all coal trains and coal terminals blow toxic coal dust in our communities. These are things that are widely recognized, and that gives the local governments real authority to address and regulate fossil fuels. Local governments in many places have climate action plans. We in the city of Portland worked hard through the public comment system to add an action into our latest climate action plan to address a policy, or to create a policy to address fossil fuel exports. One thing to note is that throughout this entire process, we kind of started opposing one propane terminal. We turned it into saying to the city, we want you to pass a policy addressing fossil fuel exports. And then we took it one step further and said, we don't really care who the end user is. We want to address comprehensively all major fossil fuel developments, these large-scale terminals. It doesn't matter. And I say this because in your communities, always take it farther. Go one more step. Keep pushing beyond what is politically acceptable in that moment and take it farther so we can keep 80% of known fossil fuel reserves in the ground. Lots of cities around the country, and especially in the Pacific Northwest, have passed resolutions opposing oil trains. These are non-binding resolutions, in many cases just expressing opposition to oil trains. Portland passed one last November, and we joined 27 other cities in Oregon and Washington who face oil by rail traffic on a daily basis. And a week after that, the city of Portland passed their amazing historic resolution. The resolution states that the city council will actively oppose expansion of infrastructure whose primary purpose is transporting and storing fossil fuels in or through Portland or its adjacent waterways. And, it's really, really just great. It was kind of blanket opposition. We've seen around the country lots of other examples that I'll touch on at the very end, addressing specific fossil fuel types. But this was the first one that pulls them all together with this grand vision that we're not going to build new fossil fuel projects. There are kind of 7 main fundamental tenets in the resolution that I'm just going to touch on really quickly. The first was this recognition of the scope and scale of fossil fuel infrastructure proposals. That's that map that I showed, these 28 projects. So it recognized that this issue is bigger than Portland, but Portland should still take action on it. It recognized the inherent risks to health and safety of transporting and storing fossil fuels. And again, that's really where local jurisdictions have the authority to regulate against fossil fuels. That being said, risks to the climate are huge. Portland has a reputation of being a climate leader, and we called out the city and said, you can't be a climate leader and you can't be praised for it if you're going to build large-scale fossil fuel developments, multi-decade investments, locking us into the fossil fuel economy and its pollution for decades to come. It also, our resolution was very much based on seismic risks. Portland is an earthquake zone, like much of California. And all 10 of our existing large-scale fossil fuel storage facilities in Portland are actually in an earthquake liquefaction zone, which means the land they're sitting on will liquefy in a major earthquake, which is predicted for the city of Portland, in which case all 10 of these tank farms would fall into the Willamette River, killing this river. It would not be recoverable. And so that was another really big argument that we were making, which was our existing fossil fuels are this ticking time bomb of destruction in our city. We can't build new fossil fuel facilities until we address the existing problems and the existing safety risks of our facilities. Also highlighting the transportation risks of transporting crude oil, coal, and other fossil fuels. Again, all pipelines eventually leak, oil trains derail, coal trains spew coal dust out as they drive through our communities. It also recognized tribal rights and the fact that many tribes in the Pacific Northwest have expressed opposition to these fossil fuel projects on their land and adjacent to it. All of the land we are on is indigenous land, but within the framework of the United States as colonizers. Recognize that. And the economic impacts, just recognizing that the fossil fuel industry, in spite of the lies it tells us, is not where we're seeing job growth. We're seeing job growth in clean tech, and renewable energy and energy efficiency, and that's where we want to go. So we passed this awesome resolution saying we're going to oppose all coal, oil, and gas. And the resolution also laid out specific frameworks for implementing it and taking it even further. It called on bureaus to investigate existing city laws and explicitly called on the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to come back with proposed zoning code changes to make it binding city law that we will not be building these terminals. It also laid out a framework for a just transition, recognizing that we do need blue-collar working-class jobs in our communities, and if they're not going to be with the fossil fuel industry, we need training programs, apprenticeships, and things like that to retrain our workforce. So yes, we built a ton of political power in our community by building diverse coalitions and using a diversity of tactics to get there. The picture on the right is from Shell No last summer, where we had this amazing, amazing protest. And that really flexed the muscle, and it showed the city of Portland that we're not just going to show up to public hearings, we're also going to put our bodies on the line to stop fossil fuels. And that's the power and the passion that we as a community have. I can just keep going. Lots of other communities are starting to pass these bans. Oakland just passed a coal terminal ban. Very, very exciting. A lot of other jurisdictions in the Northwest are starting to pass oil terminal bans. And this is really important because it is important. We have to be mindful of carbon leakage, so we don't want to just say no to something in our community and have it go somewhere else. So we really are building the regional networks to stop all of these projects. Spokane just passed a resolution for a ballot initiative to fine oil and coal trains. I am not sure if that is going to be legally defensible, but it's a really interesting policy approach that maybe a community like Richmond could investigate. So that's just kind of the nitty-gritty of what we did. It's really, really exciting. I would love to talk to folks who are at this conference who are interested in pursuing related policies in your communities, as well as my colleague Maya Jared is here, happy to talk to folks. This was grassroots policy making, communities coming from the ground up and saying, we know what's best, we know what we need, and that's not to keep investing in the fossil fuel economy.
Thank you so much, Mia. Please give a round of applause for all of our panelists who are doing incredible work from the international to the national to the local level. They are incredible individuals, but as each of them will tell you, they are not doing the work alone. This represents thousands and thousands of people coming together, building power for the change that we need. So please feel free to talk to them more, ask how you can get more involved, and join that people-powered revolution. So we have come to the end of this panel.